A red strobe pulsed above Terminal 12 in the central surveillance tower of Casil. Technician Harek Vol turned his eye stalks lazily toward the flashing light, his lower mandibles twitching with mild irritation. The terminal systems flickered again, then froze. Sector 94 patrol offline, came the mechanical voice of the console. Reset the relay, Harek muttered, already running a clawed hand across the sensor pad. No response. Just static. The room hummed with quiet efficiency. Screens lined the far wall, each showing a corner of console-monitored space. All of them active, all of them stable. Except for the feed from 94, now a cold blue error field. Two other controllers moved to assist. One was a Lithari with a serpentine lower body and translucent cyan scales. The other, a stocky four-armed Krellin who communicated only through clicks. "It's just a data echo," said the Lithari dismissively. "Dust debris, maybe a drifting signal repeater." But then another screen blinked out, and another, and then three more, simultaneous. Different sectors, different quadrants, no connection. A low, oscillating tone erupted through the tower, signaling system-wide cascade failure. Harek's hands flew across the interface. No weapon fire, no signatures, they're just gone. Patrols erased, not destroyed, just off. He stood, for the first time in a decade of service, with the cold churn of uncertainty inside his chest. In orbit over Casil's fourth moon, Station Telmar spun slowly in geosynchronous lock. At 0402 standard, an old satellite, not listed on the registry, not marked on any council map, lit up. No thermal surge, no propulsion flare, no emission bleed, just activation. And then, it spoke. The binary pulse was slow at first, then rapid, then structured. The tower AI didn't recognize the language, not at first. It had no reference for the syntax, but one junior analyst, a CERN technician named Kalex, recognized it from an old archive flagged during the Earth expulsion hearings. A forgotten file, buried under restricted classifications. Human binary. He played it back through the station's translator. "We remember the exile. Now we claim the edge." Kalex's pupils contracted. His supervisor, a bristling Marnak officer named Krelix, dismissed the message as a rogue broadcast, possibly a pirate signal or leftover code from some lost relay. "Scrub it and silence it," Krelix barked, clicking his plated jaw with authority. But the satellite ignored every override. No matter what commands were sent, disruption waves, containment loops, system isolation, it kept broadcasting. No encryption, no modulation. Just those same 11 words, pulsing again and again. On Council ship Viraleth, Captain Vos Enerhal received the alert while en route to a remote border outpost. His species, the insectoid Kraith, rarely showed emotion, but Vos tilted his carapaced head with mild curiosity at the briefing. "A malfunctioning Earth satellite?" he scoffed. "Then let us sweep it and be done." He ordered full scan. No defense systems, no armed response, not even a warning beacon. "It's abandoned," said his second officer. "Or a lure." Voss activated a proximity probe to disassemble the satellite. The probe never returned. It vanished mid-maneuver. No explosion, no debris, just gone. A moment later, Voss's command ship lost control of its internal comms. For 3 terrifying seconds, every screen aboard the Viraleth displayed one thing, that same phrase. White text on black, blinking in rhythm with the pulse of the ship's reactor. "We remember the exile. Now we claim the edge." Voss didn't speak, didn't bark orders. He watched, silent, because he understood what most in the Council command did not. This wasn't a malfunction. The same message began playing across surveillance towers in 4 different systems simultaneously. Gorseth, Pelveron, Alex Edge, and Casil, all at once, all with identical phrasing. In the Casil tower, HFY Vol's mandibles clenched. "All surveillance towers. Status?" he demanded. One by one, the responses came. Static. Then one tower's lights went dark entirely. Then another. Then all of them. All surveillance systems in Sector 4 went offline in perfect sequence. No thermal spikes. No impact alerts. Just dead silence. Krelix slammed his fist into the station console. Someone is inside the grid. Technicians scrambled, rerouting power, isolating cores, trying to sever the links. It didn't matter. The systems refused to obey. Without warning, every defensive AI in the sector initiated shutdown protocols. Not because of external attack, but because their own failsafes triggered overload, containment breach. The safeguards had been rewritten. Over the next 90 seconds, 6 major defense towers suffered internal system collapses. No bombs, no sabotage teams. Just a cascading failure that seemed to know the system's architecture better than the species who built it. In the command vault of the Council's regional headquarters on Casile Prime, High Warden Threx Odan leaned forward in his chair. A massive being of the Talvek species, stone-hued skin, angular brow ridges, and a voice like a slow landslide, he rarely spoke. But now, he addressed the crisis chamber. "This is human." The others stared at him. "Impossible," muttered one of the Zalari, a luminous-skinned species with psionic capability. "They don't have access. They were severed. Their encryption trees revoked." "And yet," Threx rumbled, tapping the table display, "there is no malware signature, no pulse relay, no interspecies key. This isn't external infiltration." He turned toward the tactical holomap, where icons representing Sector 4 defense nodes flickered out one by one. This was internal. Silence gripped the chamber. In orbit above the planet, patrol ship Theron's Reach attempted to reboot its navigational systems. Its entire starboard sector went blind for 14 seconds. By the time sensors came back online, one of their own satellites, previously dormant, was gone. Vanished from physical space. The system flagged no anomaly, only a line of ghost code in the system log. Binary, repeating the message. "We remember the exile. Now we claim the edge." Back in the tower, Technician Herrick stared at the feedless monitors. Nothing moved, no alarms sounded. But something shifted in his gut, some ancient signal of threat, older than species memory. Krelix paced, tail lashing in frustration. "This is a test. They're probing us." "No," Herrick replied. This was the test. Across the chamber, another controller, a young, nervous-looking Drovan, whispered what no one else dared to say aloud. Is this human?" No one answered, because no one could, because no one knew who or what had just spoken with Earth's forgotten voice. 15 years earlier, in the central dome of the Galactic Council, the amphitheater was already lit when Chancellor Marshal Vexley entered. No ceremony, no welcome. Only the cold hum of gravity anchors stabilizing the central chamber, and the hollow echoes of dozens of species watching him cross the floor alone. He walked with measured calm, tall, lean, gray-templed, the black of his diplomatic uniform gleaming against the radiant council dome. No escort, no aides. Only one voice would be heard today from humanity. Above him, suspended platforms shimmered, each holding delegates of member species. The crystalline Yishol with their constantly shifting fractal limbs. The hulking Saurid Reth whose armor was fused to their bone. The lithe Virine whose bioengineered wings curled and flexed like transparent silk. And at the apex, on the golden dais, sat High Arbiter Kel Saran, a towering Relak whose face was a mass of slit eyes and vertical ridges, robes draped like cascading armor. "Chancellor Vexley," the Arbiter intoned, voice augmented through a harmonic translator, "you stand before this council accused of covert sabotage, unapproved militarization, and unauthorized interference in council operations beyond your jurisdiction." The dome darkened. Dozens of holograms bloomed into the air, images of human vessels salvaging wreckage marked as restricted, of outposts constructed in neutral zones, of agents moving in and out of species sectors under false identities. Gasps rippled across the room. Some species blinked with revulsion, others hissed. The Talraxis delegates didn't even look up. The humans had broken protocol again. This time, it was documented. Vexley stepped into the center light. He didn't deny it. "I will not insult the council with denials," he said, voice calm, deliberate. "Everything shown is true. The names, the locations, the actions." A wave of shock rolled over the chamber. The Wrath commander growled, metallic jaw grinding. "Then what defense do you offer? What justification for your lawlessness?" Vexley turned his eyes toward him. That no one else had the courage to act. His words hung like gravity. Silence. He paced slowly, locking eyes with those who had spoken against Earth in previous hearings. "Your treaties forbid retaliation. Your charters prioritize non-intervention. And so, while your vessels sat in orbit recording war crimes for future tribunals, we acted. When pirate fleets hijacked water shipments for outer colonies, we deployed hunters to end them. When slavery rings grew under your blind surveillance, we burned them." The Weeshol flickered nervously, their limbs rearranging. The Vereen wings shuddered. "You call us chaotic, dangerous, unruly," Vexley continued, now circling the platform. "But it was your order that allowed stagnation, your stability that turned entire sectors into feeding grounds for predators. So yes, we interfered. We built what needed building. We dismantled what needed breaking." His voice dropped low. "Because we were the only ones who would." A slow, hateful whisper crawled from the upper tiers, spoken by the Seldathi ambassador, a gelatinous mass of translucent nerves housed in a mechanical exosuit. "You are the virus in the blood of order. You infect progress with chaos." Vexley turned, gaze hard. "We are the immune response." That was the final straw. The council erupted. The Wrath delegation slammed armored fists against their lecterns. The Zentari sang war harmonies in discordant protest. The Saurid barked for expulsion. One by one, species cast their votes, not by speech, but by lighting the glyphs floating above their platforms. Red after red, blockade, expulsion, severance. The final tally blinked across the dome. Vexley didn't flinch. "Then let the record show," he said, lifting his chin, "that Earth did not cower when ordered to, that we served a galaxy that no longer wanted us." The lights faded from the chamber, and the human delegation, what few remained, were escorted out. Within days, the edicts were enforced. All Earth-aligned embassies across the Council's reach were shuttered. Emissaries were forcibly removed from Council stations. Gates accessing central trade hubs were reprogrammed to deny human signatures. In the trade corridors of Narloon, Council ships intercepted a Terran convoy and impounded their cargo mid-transit. The Valtari Guard seized the Earth station over Delrex 7 without warning, deploying stun gases across the habitat zones. Children were dragged into containment with their families. Technicians were stripped of access and loaded onto shuttles as property was left behind. Some tried to resist. They were crushed with sonic pacifiers and locked in stasis. On frontier colony Idran 2, Governor Cyrus Solano watched as his civilian comms array went dark. Incoming messages from Earth ceased mid-sentence. The interstellar net froze. Power rations dwindled. Within a week, multiple cities across the colony declared martial emergency. Riots followed. Panic spread. Orbital defense stations went silent. No help came. In the slums of Varela, a teenage boy screamed at a blank holoscreen as his sister's transmission cut off in real time. She was stationed on Karis Base, deep in the outer loops. That base would never respond again. Governments collapsed. Local leaders attempted to negotiate trade independently, but anyone caught trading with humans faced council penalties, fines, blockade, and in some cases, planetary demotion to unaffiliated rogue status. Desperation brewed. Rage surfaced. On Carthus Prime, a crowd of exiled human engineers burned council flags in the main square, shouting in dozens of dialects. Security drones deployed to disband them. 3 were killed. Their deaths ignited an uprising that would eventually be stamped out with orbital strikes from Kraith gunships. Humanity fractured. Some gave up. Some begged for reintegration. But others, scattered across mining moons, frozen stations, deep orbit relays, began to reorganize. The blackout had one benefit. No one was watching anymore. In a decaying bunker beneath the ice fields of Rune 7, a comms operator named Rafe Iskander rerouted defunct subspace beacons to re-establish contact with black site colonies. He had to build the protocols himself. No access, no support. He did it in 7 days. Alone. In the wastelands of Thalaran Ridge, ex-scout pilot Marco Eden converted a crashed freighter into a long-range transmitter. He encrypted his first message in 2 layers of human military slang and embedded the coordinates into an old Earth ballad. The relay was picked up 200,000 kilometers away by a station that had been believed lost. Every successful contact triggered another. A network formed, not public, not official, but real. Underground bunkers became hubs. Disavowed commanders became organizers. Fringe scientists reconnected with old war assets and began rebuilding what had been buried. In an abandoned lab on the drifting remains of Station Calyx, 3 engineers booted up a war AI decommissioned by Council Treaty 50 years prior. It took 3 minutes to override the kill code. It spoke 1 word when it came online: status. And the new chapter began. Back on Earth, a cold silence settled across the High Council of what remained of the Terran Union. No official declaration was issued. There was no ceremony, no anthem, only quiet determination, only adaptation. From exile came clarity, from isolation, purpose. Steam hissed from the fractured airlock as the mining elevator slammed into the rock wall, then stopped with a heavy clank. Colonel Rowan Talbot kicked open the panel with the heel of his boot and stepped into the shaft, breathing in dust and ammonia. The underground colony of Ravel 9 didn't have proper filtration. Most didn't anymore. The corridors here were chiseled, not built. Raw edges of basalt and reinforced struts twisted like bone into steel. Light flickered from cracked panels overhead. Beneath his boots, mud and coolant pooled in uneven grooves. He passed 3 workers hauling a generator core on a makeshift sled. None of them looked up. The youngest had no eyebrows. The radiation here had started taking those first. Above ground, the desert moon's storms had torn apart the comm relays months ago. Below, this colony had learned to survive in silence. And yet, here Rowan was, summoned. He followed the corridor past an old generator room until he reached the last door, rusted, dented, and marked with the old Terran emblem, faded now, but still there. Inside, 7 men waited, each from a different world. Each had bled once for something called the Terran Union. Now, they sat at a cracked stone table under a flickering ceiling light. Marshal Anton Richter, former planetary defense strategist from Argus Station, nodded as Rowan entered. "Did you read it?" "I did." "And?" Rowan pulled a drive from his coat and tossed it onto the table. "It's not a call for help. It's a blueprint." Richter gave a slow grin. The others exchanged looks, suspicious, cautious, but interested. The gray spectrum zone was never meant to be lived in. It was a dead belt of star systems lost between formal trade corridors and patrol sectors. Radiation storms, gravity rifts, rogue moons, and unregistered orbital debris made settlement near suicidal. But that was precisely why it worked. In the years since the exile, humans who refused assimilation drifted toward the edges. Scientists too dangerous, soldiers too aggressive, engineers too curious. Colonies had sprouted like weeds, in mines, in bunkers, on broken satellites still held together by patched grav stabilizers and braided cables. This was where Marshal Vexley found them again. Not in power, not in command, but in silence, reaching one encrypted message at a time. In the frozen shell of asteroid DS-11, Vexley sat opposite Commander Seth Darrow, the last living officer from the 312th Outer Ring Task Group. "You were dead," Darrow muttered, squinting through his cracked lens visor. Vexley nodded. "I was. Until now." Darrow motioned to the hollow display between them, slowly loading across the makeshift emitter. It showed a map, Council-controlled systems in red, human exiled territories in black. Then slowly, gray zones lit up, not as points, as corridors. Webs, pathways of data, not ships. "None of this is official," Darrow said, voice quiet. "Which is exactly why it matters," Vexley replied. "You don't need a capital to have a government. You need rules, objectives, vision." He leaned forward. "You know the systems. You've studied their blind spots. I'm not asking you to die for Earth. I'm asking you to show others how not to." Darrow said nothing for a long moment, then nodded. In the orbital wreck of Station Helmira, buried under a hull breach covered by solar panels and scavenged alien composites, two engineers, Matteo Corda and Alan Bennett, uncrated an old alien propulsion array. It had belonged to a Zentari patrol ship, long scrapped. They spent 17 hours reverse engineering the containment core, taking readings and isolating its fail-safes. On the 18th hour, it lit up. By the 19th, it interfaced with their Terran framework. "Get me the test grid," Bennett barked. "I want to see if we can boost burn ratios at cold start." In a cavern on Brecca's fault, hidden beneath collapsed magma flows, Captain Elias Rodan powered up the first Entidade Tática Independente, ETI-09, codename Warden. The AI's voice returned in segments, bits of corrupted protocol stuttering through recovery cycles. Location unknown, status, blackout, directive, adaptive combat synthesis. Initiate? "Yes," Rodan said. "Initiate everything." Over the next 12 weeks, teams like his reactivated 6 more. Wardens, oracles, strikeweavers. They were old AI, designed during the early expansion wars. Council treaties had ordered them shut down. Humans never deleted them, just buried them. Now they were awake. In the reclaimed refinery on Lyra 5, an old smuggler named Tobias Fox Rames sat down with a former data engineer, a linguistics officer, and 2 black market tech vendors. They rewired a satellite dish to create an anonymized relay burst system that could transmit short encrypted packets between colonies using local drift paths and shielded asteroid reflections. "What's the range?" Fox asked. 27 systems, said the engineer. "If no one jams the bursts." "What if they do?" She shrugged. "Then we change the language." And so they did. The new network didn't use Council standard routing. It used Terran slang, compression ciphers based on 21st century digital noise, and message splitting across quantum drift relays. Within a month, 312 settlements were connected. That's when the training began. The commandos of the Exile Corps weren't born. They were made in sandstorms on Orion 2, in pressure chambers under Scythe Station, in zero-G modules retrofitted from mining pods. Each soldier trained with live simulations based on species-specific tactics, Kraith entrenchment maneuvers, Zentari swarm protocols, Reth line push formations. Every species had a rhythm. Humans learned to break it. Captain Dax Litt led one of the early regiments. He rewrote the training manuals himself. "No ranking by favor," he told the recruits. "You earn it in the field." They trained with no gravity for days, with no light, with cold simulations that mimicked vac-severed suits, ruptured airlocks, nerve gas dispersal. If one failed, the unit failed. "You're not here to win," Litt told them. "You're here to adapt faster than the one trying to kill you." In a sealed chamber on the drifting moon of Chiron 6, Marshal Vexley stood once more before a gathering of leaders. Richter, Darrow, Corda, Litt, Fox, and 20 more from other edges of human space. He pointed at a star map, no labels. Just shadow corridors, ghost paths, untouchable zones. No more waiting, no more reaction. He turned toward the room. We're not building a nation. We're building a framework, an empire that doesn't need planets or flags. One man raised his hand. What do we call it? Vexley didn't blink. The Frontier Empire. No cheers, no banners, only men who knew what came next. And silence, the kind that means countdown. The power grid in Relay Station Calmet 6 dropped at 0300 sharp. A single pulse, too quick to trigger alarms, slid through the backup relays, latching onto the control loop for the station's atmospheric regulators. Lights dimmed. Climate controls cycled into shutdown mode. 17 seconds later, the doors on sub-level 3 unlocked without command input. Captain Elias Rordan watched from a maintenance alcove, his borrowed coveralls smeared with grease, oxygen tank labeled in Varnati script. The identity chip in his wrist blinked green. The uniform read, Auxiliary Tech Crew, Relief Zone 7. No one stopped him. No one looked twice. He slipped past 2 Kraith officers and entered the central systems chamber. Inside, 2 humans, Dax Lit and Matteo Corda, were already rerouting power nodes with cold efficiency. We have 8 minutes, Lit said without looking up. 6, Rordan corrected, already moving toward the encryption core. The plan was simple. Insert the override key, trigger the blackout, extract the intel cache, disappear. It worked exactly like they trained, until the secondary AI kicked back. The station lights pulsed once, then again. A warning tone shrieked from the overhead panel as one of the console screens flickered to life. They're running an integrity scan, Corda hissed. It's not from the grid, it's organic, local. Manual failsafe? Rordan asked. Lit nodded. Or worse, reactive AI. Do we abort? Lit's hands never stopped moving. No, we finish. They severed the command chain, dumped a ghost loop into the network, and rerouted the data to a portable spike drive. No firefight, no bodies, just silence. And then, gone. No one knew who had done it. No species was blamed. The Kraith launched an internal investigation and blamed faulty code. The Council classified it as a maintenance failure. The next 2 operations weren't so clean. On Nerion's drift, 2 humans, posing as bonded freight workers from a destroyed colony, were brought aboard Supply Platform 3SR. They passed 6 biometric scans, logged in under false identities registered through corrupted Council archives, and requested assignment in the repair wing. For 6 days, they worked with real staff, slept in communal quarters, ate from ration bays. On the 7th day, they overloaded the main fuel manifold with a synthetic compound reverse-engineered from harvested Caldari waste residue. They left nothing but a locked maintenance locker sealed from the inside. By the time Council analysts reviewed the feed, both workers were unidentifiable. Their heat signatures vanished mid-shift, absorbed by emergency ducting they shouldn't have known existed. 3 weeks later, a similar incident occurred aboard a data relay station over Sornelek. 2 men, disguised as contract translators, accessed the secondary node array, shut down external traffic for 12 minutes, extracted 4 terabytes of encrypted comm logs, and vanished into the cargo deck during a station-wide lockdown drill they triggered themselves. None of these acts were traced. No political statement, no flag, no demands. Just scars, left with surgical precision. But the event that changed everything came on Tisari 4. The infiltration team boarded under the designation Humanitarian Outreach, Logistics Assistance, their vessel registered as Independent Civilian Aid, dispatched by the Intercolony Transit Accord. All false, all Council certified. There were 5 of them: Rordan, Lit, Fox Rames, and 2 new operatives, Corporal Brent Kalin and Lieutenant Jacob Ives. They wore no armor, no firearms, just tools, patches, medical kits. They walked through 3 checkpoints. Inside the data vault, Lit whispered, "We go in clean. We come out lighter." They extracted the central archive core of the planetary registry, 60 pounds of crystal-based server nodes, under a suppression field. When security systems finally activated, it was too late. They walked through a fire corridor under hostile fire, Rordan dragging the case, Ives throwing decoys, flash emitters disguised as ration packs. At the exit point, Fox paused, reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded flag. He placed it on the console in the main tower under the emergency beacon. Plain white, black border, Terran stripes. The message was clear. When the footage leaked days later, council stations debated endlessly. Who were they? Why the minimal force? Why take data instead of destroying it? No one could answer. The Council's Strategic Response Division, led by High Marshal Avrex, a quadrupedal Vron with hardened chitin plates and optical relay implants, called for tactical review. "Whoever these saboteurs are," Avrex hissed, "they know our stations, our habits, our procedures. This is not random. This is rehearsed." Indeed it was. By then, the human structure was growing, quietly. On the barren moon of Talos 8, training centers operated out of abandoned mining shafts. There were no ranks, no medals, only trials, obstacle courses, simulated urban raids, atmospheric breach conditions, zero-G sabotage, hostile species engagement, and terminal deprivation. Operatives were rotated every 6 weeks, names changed, leadership reassigned, roles inverted. Only one rule remained: adapt or be replaced. Recruits who failed were removed, not punished, not berated, just dismissed, sent to logistics, supply, or re-education. Those who succeeded were hardened by silence, by failure, by the pressure of a system that asked only for results, not intentions, not stories. At Outpost Harkon 13, Commander Litt stood before a class of new recruits. "You want position?" he barked. "Take it!" He tossed a blank pad on the ground. "Prove you can solve what the man beside you can't. That's your rank." From engineering to infiltration, roles weren't assigned. They were earned, re-earned, lost, stolen back. Tobias Rames established what would become the Human Ghost Net, a decentralized framework of rotating cell leaders, cross-trained operatives, and encoded data mules who could deliver live intel without ever accessing a network. One handler said, "You could cut the spine of a city, and they'd never know you were there until their doors stopped opening." Still, the Council refused to believe they faced an organized threat. Their species were too advanced, too many, too superior. Surely this was isolated. Surely it would pass. Until the next system flickered, and the next flag appeared. The control tower on Virex Theta lost contact with its orbital ring at 0417 local. No explosions, no alerts, just silence. Inside the tower's command hub, Overseer Dalek, a rotund Garn with mottled bronze skin and breath that steamed in low temperatures, slammed his clawed fist against the side of the main console. "Ping again," he growled to his technician. "Already did," replied the Valari comms officer, whose translucent skin pulsed in uneasy pinks. "Sat-Link 9, 11, and 12 are dark. Relay chain's broken. Nothing's coming back." Dalek turned his narrow eyes to the external feed. The satellites were there, still in orbit, still rotating, but the command handshake was gone, like trying to shout into a vacuum. Then the image flickered, briefly, just long enough to show new markings on the shell of Sat-Link 11, etched into the plating in blackened titanium. A Terran numeral. 12 minutes later, the tower's guidance AI issued a full shutdown command. By then, it was already too late. Across Sector 8, Council listening posts went dark in sequence. Carthus Prime's comnet fell at 0502 standard. The Drelk listening node failed at 0504, then Gliss Station, then Arellan's Belt. A ring of silence, expanding outward from points no one had considered strategically significant. They didn't know they'd already been mapped months ago. In a converted cargo bay aboard a hijacked freighter, now renamed the Arc Cutter, Operative Dax Litt stood over a synchronized operations map rendered in spectral lines and predictive interference models. 26 systems affected, confirmed Field Engineer Luca Venn, his voice clipped, eyes locked on the ripple feed. "Confirm clean?" Lit asked. "Clean. No digital trails. Bounce protocol held. No repeats in access signatures." Lit nodded. "Then initiate the next cluster." Ven keyed the sequence, and new nodes began to blink red, one by one, like matchheads flaring in reverse. On Altorex Station, a high-level diplomatic node responsible for managing dispute records between 14 council races experienced a cascading shutdown. Its servers didn't crash. They didn't overload. They reset, looping back to a manufacturing baseline last used during its prototype phase. Every record wiped, every backup redirected to ghost relays. The station's overseers panicked, scrambling to understand what had triggered the rollback. What they didn't see were the 6 humans, dressed as maintenance workers, quietly stepping into a gravity pod on sub-level 3, carrying nothing but portable drives and one bag of calibrated scrap designed to mimic detonation debris. None of them looked back. Elsewhere, in the central courtyard of Zenthari Base on Jurok 3, Lieutenant Jacob Ives led a 4-man team posing as independent researchers delivering specialized microfiltration units for low-atmospheric terraforming. The units worked perfectly until their control processes were triggered remotely to reverse their internal shielding frequencies, effectively turning them into localized signal sinks that absorbed all outgoing communication for a 2-kilometer radius. While Zenthari security scrambled to isolate the disruption, Ives's team moved directly into the administration wing, bypassing biometric locks using harvested templates stored in Council Black archives. They didn't fire a shot. They didn't need to. Within 22 minutes, they had extracted the deployment schedule of 17 observation satellites, 6 long-range sensor stations, and 2 unmapped defense relays. They left the same way they arrived. Inside the security station's central processor, someone later found a looping access ID string. It was a recycled code from a decommissioned Earth freighter lost a decade earlier. That was no coincidence. Satellites were next. Human teams didn't destroy them. They repurposed them. On the fringes of Elisari space, 6 Council satellites began transmitting irregular data packets. At first, technicians assumed it was a solar interference event. But when they parsed the data, the formatting didn't match any known protocol. Upon closer inspection, linguists discovered the pattern was layered with embedded Terran cultural fragments, music encoded into telemetry pulses, Earth languages layered beneath compression data, analog waveforms replicating pre-expansion communications. The realization came slowly and too late. Those satellites were no longer listening. They were speaking. By the time High Marshal Avrex of the Strategic Response Division initiated a trace, the codes had already rewritten the firmware on 57 other satellites across 12 systems. Each reprogrammed device acted independently, passing fragmented messages from human operatives, never repeating, never traceable. And still, not a single death had been reported. Council marshals convened a classified briefing. 15 species sent representatives. The consensus was confusion. "These attacks leave infrastructure intact," growled Commander Valor, a saurid tactician with bone-plated armor fused directly into his chest. "Why not burn them? Why not make examples?" Avrex, his voice low and strained, replied, "Because this isn't a war. It's a message." And the message was spreading. On the agri-world of Dromus V, the Planetary Command Center was overrun by what appeared to be a spontaneous civilian revolt. Guards were disabled, never killed, using redirected irrigation pressure systems that ruptured internal blast doors. Inside, the new operators used hard-coded terminals to send a council-wide broadcast demanding food supply independence for all self-sufficient colonial systems. But the voice was modulated, unidentifiable. Their exit route, a decoy shuttle launched 6 minutes before lockdown. Inside, technicians found no bodies, just a single black box and a folded strip of cloth with the silhouette of a human face drawn in code. In every system touched, the story repeated. Officers tranquilized, not executed. Command centers captured, not razed. Code fragments replaced clean instructions. Old Terran slogans were hidden in layers of system messages, no longer visible unless decoded manually. The message was always the same. We're not here for revenge. We're here for control. By the second week, Council logistics had collapsed. Supply requests looped without response. Interspecies diplomatic exchanges were rerouted to dead nodes. Key outposts couldn't confirm whether incoming traffic was civilian or hostile. Entire sectors operated blind, and still no known enemy fleet, no political declaration, just outcomes. Commander Rowan Talbot stood atop the wind-swept ridge of Typhon Car's northern plateau, his eyes fixed on the burning sky as a repurposed Council satellite blinked overhead, its broadcast channel now carrying encrypted weather data for nearby human colonies. He turned to Elias Rorden, waiting beside him. We took 29 worlds without firing a single mass driver. Rorden didn't smile. He just nodded once. That's not conquest. That's replacement. In the distance, human engineers were already laying the foundation for a listening post carved into the ridge, using prefab alloys and salvaged Kraith shield spines. They wouldn't be hiding anymore. They were building, and no one would hear it until it was already done. The doors of the command chamber slid shut behind him with a final hiss. Marshal Vexley stepped forward without speaking, the heavy collar of his black field jacket resting just below the old Terran seal pinned to his chest. His face was thinner than before, his hair more silver than gray, but his eyes, sharp, calculating, alive, cut across the chamber with the weight of command. 12 men waited at the table. No guards, no aides, no emblems, only silence and respect. Commander Elias Rorden stood first. Marshal. Vexley offered a short nod. Sit. They obeyed. This was the Citadel room, hidden beneath outpost torsion, buried in the rock spine of what was once a failed mining colony. Now it served as the central node for the Frontier Empire's strategic command. Around the table, Rorden, Dax Litt, Tobias Rames, Anton Richter, Seth Darrow, and others, generals in all but name. Most of them bore scars from years of exile. All had command over hundreds of operatives scattered across dozens of systems. Vexley remained standing. What we've done in the last 5 years, he began, was never meant as a campaign. There was no manifesto, no ambition for territory. We were cast out, and we adapted. He turned, hands behind his back. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted to prove that dependence wasn't survival, that council approval wasn't authority, that autonomy, earned, secured, protected, was possible. Richter leaned forward. And now we have it. We have pieces, Vexley corrected. But the council hasn't acted, not because they're weak, because they don't understand what they're looking at. We've stayed beneath the radar. That ends now. The room shifted. Litt spoke. You're proposing escalation? No, Vexley replied. I'm proposing diffusion. Rames raised an eyebrow. Meaning? We give it away. They waited. We begin strategic support to all independent systems, outpost colonies, and non-aligned planetary governments still under council pressure, Vexley said. Not as liberators, not as warriors, as an alternative. Rorden X. Talbot threw his nose. Weapons? Where needed. Intel. Always. Open declaration? Vexley shook his head. No flags, no ultimatums. They'll know who helped them, and that will be enough. Across the galaxy, small worlds held fragile governments, agri-planets run by farmers with aging satellites, moon settlements defended by retrofitted mining drones, orbital trade hubs taxed into ruin by the Council's economic mandates. Vexley wanted them armed, not just with rifles, with knowledge. That night, the first shipments left from the Edge stations, encrypted databanks carrying instruction manuals on sabotage engineering, resistance protocols, and manufacturing processes for independent energy grids. Shipments didn't go to capitals. They went to slums, underground networks, pirate relays. Alongside the tech came compressed communication protocols, rooted in Terran code architecture but translated into every major language across the known systems. Manuals on how to hijack Council comm relays, how to spoof their identification beacons, how to erase traces without detection. And yes, weapons, not fleets, not dreadnoughts, not war machines, small arms, precision disruptors, EMP grenades with recycled core shells. Tools designed not for destruction, but disruption. Every delivery was accompanied by a single code phrase: make your choice. In the Citadel room, the debate shifted. Darrow, quiet until now, leaned forward. What if they use our help to escalate civil wars? Then they aren't allies, Vexley said. And we cut the stream. Then what's our line? Asked Lit. When do we stop? When they stop needing us, Vexley answered. Or when they choose the Council over freedom. No one spoke for a moment. Rames drummed his fingers on the table. You think culture's more dangerous than firepower? It is, Vexley said. Culture survives the blast radius. Anton Richter tapped a data pad and brought up a cluster of systems on the map. 14 independent worlds flagged, most with weak governments, high resource potential. They've been kept compliant by trade restrictions. Lift the restrictions, Vexley said. Give them trade alternatives, data chains, blueprints for hydrocell reactors and fusion stabilizers. You're willing to share our energy designs? They're not ours, Vexley replied. They're stolen, from the Council. Let's return the favor. And so the network expanded. On Calvarin Prime, resistance cells used human encryption tools to block orbital scans and coordinate strikes against Council-aligned governors. In the Drellis system, smugglers rerouted supplies through human-designed subspace corridors to deliver medicine to plague zones, previously blockaded for containment. Council reaction came slowly. At first, they dismissed the events as local unrest. Then came patterns, too precise to ignore. But they still didn't see the origin. They saw ghosts. Inside the Citadel, Vexley reviewed each report personally. He spoke rarely, listened always. Every move was calculated, every risk accepted for a reason. Riordan met him outside the chamber one night. You don't talk much anymore, he said. I've said enough, Vexley answered. Now I want them to speak. To who? To each other. The galaxy's filled with species that never shared a thought. Let's see what happens when they all start whispering the same name. What name is that? Vexley looked up at the stars above the chamber dome. Ours. Even if they don't know it yet. And so it spread. Not with banners or invasions, but with silence, with code, with tools placed in the right hands, and systems that once looked to the Council for permission started looking elsewhere. Flames danced across the banners of the Council. In the central plaza of Orman's Reach, a trade nexus straddling 3 hyperlanes, a crowd had gathered beneath the flickering image of the Council's emblem. Dozens of alien species stood shoulder to shoulder, silent, unmoving, as the holographic seal collapsed into static. Moments later, a new symbol replaced it. A black hexagon split down the center, wrapped in broken circuitry, the mark of the human frontier empire. A single torch arced through the air, then another. Fabric ignited. The real banners, stitched into the walls of the station, burned in silence. Commander Tavros, a hulking Lectari with a segmented shell and dual vocal ridges, pushed through the crowd with 4 security drones trailing him. "Shut it down," he growled. But by the time the drones moved, the transmissions had already been rerouted. Every comm display, every public console, every terminal on Orman's Reach was broadcasting the same message. We are not your subjects. We are your replacement. From across the galaxy, similar reports flooded into Council intelligence channels. On Delkesh Prime, the planetary governor's palace was evacuated overnight. The local defense grid had failed without warning. No breach, no siege, just silence. When scouts arrived at dawn, they found the Council seal torn down and 3 symbols etched into the governor's wall, burned into the alloy with surgical heat. One of them was unmistakably human. On Farron's Spire, a high-orbit trade station operated by the Nalthari Confederation, local administrators called an emergency vote. By morning, they had declared formal neutrality. 3 hours later, smugglers delivered data caches to every subdeck, each containing compressed files, council blacklists, embargo manifests, intercepted communication between core officials. By midday, the council's own lies were public. In an open channel, translated into 21 dialects, a voice spoke. "The information you were denied is now yours. Choose accordingly." They did. 7 systems went dark. Not because they were conquered, because they walked away. Inside the council's inner chamber on Verelium Prime, panic spread like oil on fire. High Arbiter Kelsaran slammed a clawed fist on the circular console embedded in his throne. "Name them," he demanded. The delegate from the Talarn Republic, a withered biped with translucent skin and golden implants, hissed, "We don't know. We can't trace the transmission routes. They're bouncing through non-aligned systems, piggybacking on backhaul lanes we didn't even catalog. Then trace the receivers." The chamber lights dimmed. Screens lit the room, planet after planet, showing evidence of systemic departure. Docks repainted, security forces disbanded. Council officials recalled or exiled. And across every scene, the same pattern. Not an invasion, not destruction, but redirection. The Council's control wasn't being attacked. It was being bypassed. On Ketron Station, cargo freighters switched to private contract lanes, now controlled by human operatives. Trade ships stopped reporting to central route authorities. Messages between sectors began to travel faster, encrypted deeper, and carried foreign protocol signatures, hybrid code based on Terran architectures. Rames's net had matured. The culture had metastasized. A message appeared across several independent forums, places where civilians once gathered to complain about fuel prices or docking taxes. "Your compliance is your permission. End both." It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. In the orbital markets of Leraktal, merchant guilds burned their council licenses in ritual silence. Where the seal once hung, a small cloth patch was stitched in its place, a stylized star inside a circle of 12 dots. 12 for the systems that had vanished. More would follow. In the northern hemisphere of Sularis, a high-security military listening station suddenly redirected its comnet to civilian channels. Confused operators tried to lock it down but were met with corrupted authorization keys. The overrides used protocols outdated by 60 years, Terran protocols. The last recorded image before the station went offline showed a technician, human, saluting the camera with a data drive in his hand. No one stopped him. Inside the Council's war chamber, the final straw cracked. High Marshal Avrex appeared on the central holopad, his voice a low rasp through vocoders. "We no longer face terrorism, we face transformation. These are not isolated events. This is a coordinated withdrawal from Council supremacy." Kelsaran glared down from his throne. "And what do you propose?" "Authorization for direct retaliation, fleet deployment, sector lockdowns." Silence answered. Then, one by one, the glyphs of approval lit the council ring. They gave the order. Across the core systems, hundreds of ships began deployment protocols, the largest fleet mobilization since the Sorn rebellions. The plan was simple. Force the defected systems into submission. Send a message. Restore fear. But by the time the first dreadnought crossed into the Haskari Drift, it was already too late. Human code had rewritten the lanes. Navigation charts didn't match real space. Fuel projections were off. Relay beacons were silent. The ships weren't entering conflict zones. They were entering dead space, traps, ghost corridors, false pings. Every minute of delay cost them systems, and still the message spread. On the fringe of Galveth Station, a child pulled her father's old council patch off his jacket and stitched a new one in its place. She didn't know what it meant, but she'd seen it on the screens. on the crates of food that started arriving, on the shields that flickered to life again after years of being dead. To her, it meant light. To everyone watching, it meant the future had changed hands. The Council had ruled through structure, but the humans had seeded something deeper, not a weapon, an idea, and now it moved faster than fleets, faster than fear, and there was no one left to stop it. The lights inside the Council's Central Fleet Command dimmed exactly 12 seconds before launch. Not from power failure, not from sabotage, by design. Across 5 military bases, spanning 3 sectors, every holotable, every command chair, every communications deck froze mid-sequence. Admiral Varesk, a towering Vran with cobalt ridges across his skull and gold-plated carapace over his shoulders, spun in place. "Report!" he snapped, mandibles flared. No one responded. Instead, every screen came to life at once. No symbols, no logos, just a black field and a voice. It was calm, unyielding, human. "Your silence forged us. Your arrogance empowered us. We are no longer waiting." The screens cut out. Then came the cascade. Relays across the launch corridors dropped into lockdown. Docking clamps on 15 warships froze. Fuel lines rerouted to cooling reservoirs. Command uplinks were hijacked in real time, and authorization keys, long thought impenetrable, responded to dead codes from long decommissioned Terran vessels. Vice Marshal Idrak, a 6-eyed Zarn with tentacle-linked cranial arrays, barked through his translator. "Who triggered the broadcast?" A young officer trembled. "We don't know. It didn't come through our network. It didn't come through any network." Within minutes, the message had spread. Not through military channels, through civilians, private terminals, cargo drones, transit hubs, farming satellites, medical relays. And it said the same thing every time. We are no longer waiting. At the Council's emergency gathering on Varelian Prime, panic turned to paralysis. Dozens of species demanded explanation, but none could trace the source. In the diplomatic forum of Nalthek, once a loyal extension of the Council's influence, governors from 7 minor worlds presented a single document: formal integration under frontier law. No war. No occupation. They had chosen, and they were not the only ones. On the outlying arc world of Yevros, the planetary broadcast was overridden mid-market. A countdown appeared. 20 seconds. The crowd stopped, waited. When the timer hit 0, every screen displayed a rotating field of data. Orbital configurations, fuel production algorithms, defense grid schematics, all in human compression formatting. They weren't threats. They were gifts. A minute later, the planetary network shut down voluntarily. The first banner was raised 2 hours later. In Port Carl, a deep-space junction along the edge of the rings of Jira, thousands gathered on the main concourse. Humans, Kraith defectors, hybrid merchants, former Council logistics officers, refugees from fractured border colonies. One by one, they tossed Council flags into a growing pile. A young boy lit the flame. The crowd stood silent as it spread. Above them, station-wide displays flickered through 12 different dialects, displaying the same simple message. The future does not require permission. Council security drones hovered at a distance but didn't intervene. The operators had vanished. On the observation deck of Docking Bay 3, Elias Rawdon watched from behind tinted glass, arms folded, jaw tight. "They didn't need force," he said. "They just needed to stop asking." Beside him, Commander Rowan Talbot nodded once. "They're ahead of schedule." "They're not following a schedule," Rawdon replied. "They're building one." Atmo alarms blared. The crowd looked up. A shadow passed over the port. A vast hull emerging from orbital drift, silent, unannounced, unarmed. Its plating was angular, matte black with gray understructure and radiant interference shielding. No insignia, no lights, except for the single word painted across the side in stark white: freedom. The ship made no demands, fired no weapons. Its presence was enough. Across the rings, Every transport ship switched comm alignment to the new field the vessel emitted. Not forced, not jammed, aligned. The gravity of power had shifted. In the depths of Council territory, Admiral Varesk slammed his fist into the side of the war map. "We don't face a rebellion," he snarled. "We face a replacement." In the dark corners of the chamber, few disagreed. Above Delkesh Station, a Kraith patrol ship abandoned post without command. On the surface of Talos Kel, a council administrator threw his security badge into a trash compactor and joined the crowd chanting beneath the new sigil. And in the ruins of Corin City, once burned by council stabilization protocols, a group of children painted their walls not with words but with shapes, triangles, broken rings, shattered crowns. None of them remembered Earth, but they remembered who gave them power. In the citadel beneath Outpost Torsion, Marshal Vexley stood before a new map, one not built on borders, but on connections. Data lines, cultural flows, trade nodes. "Reports?" he asked. Anton Richter tapped a secure pad. 29 more planetary governments have declared autonomy from the Council. 17 are now requesting aid using our relay paths. Lit added, Port Carroll's public transition has inspired 5 more uprisings in the rings. No bloodshed reported. "Any movement from the retaliation fleet?" Vexley asked. "Delayed. Systems conflict. Command divergence. Too many sectors disagreeing." "Good," Vexley said. He stepped back from the display. "They tried to rule a network using walls," he said. "We gave the network a mind of its own." "What happens when they strike back?" asked Talbot. "They'll strike against empty chairs," Vexley answered. "We're not where they're aiming." A new feed opened on the display. Outer ring systems. Multiple nodes lit in sequence. Cultural shifts. Technological uploads. Education streams. Not conquest. Conversion. Riordan stared at the growing grid. The Council doesn't know what it's fighting anymore. "They're not fighting a planet," Vexley said. "They're fighting a code." He turned toward the table, his voice low but final. "A culture." On the outer edge of the rings, beneath the burning stars of a fractured system, a dock worker handed a ration pack to a hungry child. It had no brand, only one message on the wrapper, printed in old Terran script. "Survival is not submission. Adapt, rise, endure." And as the station turned slowly toward the light of the next star, a new truth settled across the galaxy. It was no longer about borders. It was about who would teach the rest of the galaxy what it meant to survive. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. Hope you had a great time with the story. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really makes a huge difference to the channel. And hey, I've got something else for you. I've chosen another story that I think you'll really enjoy. Just click the card right here, or hit this one to jump into the full playlist. See you in the next one.